This week, we explore how Mexican muralism emerged from the aftermath of the Mexican Revolution and gave rise to a public, political, and often didactic art movement. We'll also look at how Hispanic artists across the Americas continue to challenge systems of power through imagery and storytelling. Diego Rivera's The History of Mexico is more than just a mural. It's a monumental retelling of an entire nation's past from an indigenous and revolutionary perspective. Painted across the stairwell of the National Palace, it weaves together pre-Columbian civilizations, colonial violence, the Mexican Revolution, and visions of socialist utopia. Rivera doesn't aim for subtlety. Instead, he saturates each panel with powerful symbolism, bold figures, and layered scenes of conflict and resistance. At the center is a clear message. Mexico's identity is rooted not in conquest, but in the strength of its people. Farmers, workers, rebels. This was a direct challenge to European-dominated histories and elite narratives. Rivera saw art as a weapon for education and liberation, and this mural was intended to reach everyone, not just museum goers, but everyday citizens walking through government buildings. The history of Mexico is Rivera's epic, a frescoed call to remember, reclaim, and revolt.
José Clemente Orozco's The Epic of American Civilization is a thunderous visual symphony that spans thousands of years of human history, from Mesoamerican ritual sacrifice to the mechanized warfare of the modern age. Painted at Dartmouth College, this sprawling fresco cycle is brutally honest, unflinchingly critical, and intellectually layered. Orozco explores themes of violence, oppression, and cultural collapse, but also resilience and transformation. He contrasts indigenous civilizations with colonization and capitalism, ultimately portraying all societies as vulnerable to self-destruction through greed and dogma. Unlike Rivera, who often leaned toward utopian visions, Orozco offers no easy heroes, just hard truths and haunting metaphors. The central figure of a skeletal Christ with arms spread evokes both sacrifice and warning. By painting this in an elite Ivy League institution, Orozco brought Mexican revolutionary fervor straight into the heart of American academia. It's not just a mural, it's a philosophical indictment painted in fire and ash. David Alfaro Siqueiros' Death to the Invader is a defiant, thunderous declaration of solidarity against imperialism. Painted in Chile alongside local artists, this mural was Siqueiros' response to both colonial conquest and the looming specter of fascism during World War II. At its core, it links the Spanish invasion of the Americas with the contemporary threat posed by Nazi Germany, two forms of cultural and physical domination separated by centuries but united in their brutality. The central figure of a Mapuche warrior stands in symbolic resistance, rising against the forces of oppression. Siqueiros was known for his innovative techniques like spraying paint with air guns and for his radical politics, both of which are on full display here. The mural isn't just a condemnation, it's a call to action. It suggests that indigenous resistance, revolutionary fervor, and international anti-fascist unity are all part of the same struggle. In this way, Death to the Invader turns public space into political space, urgent, visceral, and unapologetically militant. Frida Kahlo's The Two Fridas is often read as intensely personal, two versions of herself, one in European dress and the other in indigenous clothing, seated side by side, hearts exposed, veins connecting them across time and trauma. But to see this as only autobiographical would miss its revolutionary resonance. Kahlo was married to Diego Rivera, and though her style was more surrealist and symbolic than the grand narratives of muralism, her work is equally political. Like the Mexican muralists, she drew from indigenous heritage, national identity, and collective struggle, but turned those themes inward into the domestic and the intimate. Her pain becomes a metaphor for a fractured Mexico, colonized and decolonized, traditional and modern. While Rivera painted on walls, Kahlo painted on herself, yet both sought to redefine Mexican identity through their respective lenses. The two Fridas becomes a quiet mural of the self, layering the personal with the political, the body with the body politic. It's revolutionary, just turned inside out. Rufino Tamayo's The Man, 1953, offers a powerful modernist alternative to the politically charged murals of his contemporaries. While Rivera, Orozco, and Siqueiros focused on revolutionary themes and historical narratives, Tamayo chose to explore more universal human concerns, existence, emotion, and the individual's place in the cosmos. In The Man, a monumental figure bursts upward, his body fragmented and stylized, as if caught in a moment of existential eruption. The color palette, dominated by reds and earthy tones, intensifies the emotional tension of the work. Tamayo believed that art should transcend ideology. Although his murals were public, his messages were internal. The Man doesn't lecture, it evokes. It presents humanity as both vulnerable and resilient, torn between chaos and control. In this way, Tamayo both belongs to and breaks away from the Mexican muralist tradition. He shares its scale and national pride, but channels it into something more introspective and spiritual. The Man asks us not to join a cause, but to reflect on what it means to be human. Judith Baca's The Great Wall of Los Angeles is one of the most ambitious and inclusive public art projects in U.S. history. Spanning more than half a mile along the Tujunga Wash in LA, the mural tells the stories often left out of textbooks: indigenous histories, civil rights struggles, immigration, internment camps, LGBTQ activism, and more. Created with the help of hundreds of youth, many from marginalized communities, Baca used the process itself as a form of activism and healing. The act of painting became an act of reclaiming space, memory, and voice. Stylistically, the work draws on the Mexican muralist tradition: bold color, social narrative, and public engagement, but reimagines it through a distinctly American multicultural lens. Baca sees murals not just as decoration, but as democratic tools, accessible, community driven, and socially engaged. The Great Wall doesn't just depict history, it makes history, both in scale and in the radical act of who gets to be remembered. It's living proof that art can quite literally rewrite the landscape. Esther Hernandez's Sun Mad is a bold, graphic protest piece that reimagines the familiar sun-made raisin box as a symbol of toxic agriculture. In her version, the smiling maiden is transformed into a skeletal figure, an allusion to both Dia de los Muertos iconography and environmental death. The blood-red background and acid yellow lettering scream urgency. Created in 1981, this screen print was Hernandez's response to the dangerous pesticides used in California's Central Valley, where she and her family had worked as farm laborers. The message is clear: beneath the sunny branding lies a system that poisons the workers and the land. The piece reflects the Chicana feminist movement's embrace of visual satire and cultural reclamation. It's also part of a broader activist art tradition that uses recognizable imagery to subvert expectations and expose injustice. Like Dadaist collage or pop art gone political, Sun Mad is clever, chilling, and unforgettable, a radical remix of corporate propaganda with a deadly punchline. Yolanda Lopez's Portrait of the Artist as the Virgin of Guadalupe flips a sacred symbol on its head, reimagining the Virgin not as a passive, pious icon, but as a strong, joyful Chicana woman sprinting forward in sneakers. Painted in 1978, this self portrait is a bold act of feminist reclamation. Lopez drapes herself in the Virgin's traditional stars and blue cloak, but casts aside the usual solemnity. Her expression is lively, her muscles are visible, and her role is active. She's not praying for salvation, she is the power. This work challenges the submissive archetype that the church and society often assign to women, especially Latinas. Instead, Lopez inserts herself into a divine lineage, suggesting that everyday women, mothers, workers, and artists are sacred too. It's humorous, it's confrontational, and it celebrates identity without apology. Like many of her Chicano art contemporaries, Lopez uses the language of familiar iconography to demand new interpretations and visibility on her own terms. Chaz Bojorquez's Señor Suerte is one of the most iconic works in Chicano street art, a fusion of graffiti, cultural identity, and spiritual defiance. Created in 1979, this image features a skeletal figure with a fedora and a wide grin, a gangster style embodiment of death drawn from tattoo and barrio iconography. Señor Suerte, or Mr. Luck, wasn't invented by Bojorquez, but he elevated the symbol into high art, giving voice to an entire generation of marginalized youth. The lettering surrounding the figure is done in Bojorquez's signature Cholo calligraphy, a script rooted in Los Angeles street culture but treated with the reverence of medieval illumination. In this piece, death isn't something to be feared, it's a badge of honor, a guardian, and a symbol of resilience. The work bridges worlds, fine art and graffiti, tradition and rebellion, sacred and profane. It demands recognition of street culture not as criminal, but as creative, spiritual, and culturally rich, a key thread in the broader tapestry of American art. Enrique Chagoya's Illegal Alien's Guide to Greater America is a biting and layered work that challenges how we define alien, illegal, and even America itself. Using a visual format that mimics ancient codices, those folding narrative books used by pre Columbian cultures, Chagoya layers cartoon figures, religious icons, colonial imagery, and pop culture references into a dense, almost overwhelming narrative scroll. The result is a satirical and complex critique of colonialism, immigration policy, and the contradictions of U.S. nationalism. His use of humor is pointed. Mickey Mouse might appear alongside an Aztec god, while a Border Patrol agent is placed next to a conquistador. Chagoya's piece doesn't offer a linear story, but instead immerses the viewer in the cultural clash and absurdity of migration discourse. By reclaiming the codex format, he reconnects with indigenous knowledge while simultaneously using it to critique the systems that erase that knowledge. It's bold, irreverent, and politically charged, pure data by way of post colonial resistance. Alfredo Yar's A Logo for America first appeared on an electronic billboard in Times Square in 1987 and remains a landmark example of conceptual and activist art. Using short looping animations, Yar confronts viewers with a simple but jarring claim: this is not America. Highly influenced by the work of Jenny Holzer, Yar's screen flashes an image of the United States map with the word America over it, only to be contradicted by the next slide. Yar's point is clear. The term America should not be synonymous with just the United States when it is, in fact, a continent shared by many countries. This semantic critique expands into a political one, questioning cultural imperialism, nationalism, and the erasure of Latin American identities. The public commercial setting only sharpens the message, interrupting consumer spectacle with geopolitical commentary. Jar's work embodies the spirit of socially engaged conceptualism, minimal in form, maximal in impact, provoking a rethinking of language, identity, and who gets to define what America means. Pedro Reyes' Palas por Pistolas, Shovels for Guns, is a powerful anti violence project that blends performance, sculpture, and social practice. In collaboration with the Mexican government and local communities, Reyes organized a voluntary gun exchange program in Culiacan, an area heavily affected by gun violence. Residents turned in over 1,500 weapons, which were then melted down and recast into shovels. These shovels were distributed to schools and civic groups to plant trees, transforming tools of death into tools of life. The project's title is a poetic reversal of the biblical swords into plowshares, adapted for contemporary Mexico. It carries a clear anti war, anti violence message aligned with broader Latin American traditions of art serving social good. Reyes's approach reflects Dada's legacy of transforming objects to challenge systems, except here, the transformation is literal and communal. Palas por Pistolas doesn't just symbolize hope, it plants it, one tree at a time, with every shovel a former gun. Carlos Merida's murals for the Civic Center, 1950 to 1952, created for Guatemala's Civic Center, are a striking fusion of modernist abstraction, indigenous symbolism, and architectural integration. Merida, who was of mixed Spanish and Maya heritage, sought to reflect Latin America's complex cultural identity by merging ancient Mesoamerican motifs with contemporary visual language. Rather than painting realistic scenes, he employed stylized geometric forms inspired by pre-Columbian art and textiles, embedded directly into the buildings themselves using colored concrete and mosaic. Unlike Rivera, Orozco, or Siqueiros, Merida leaned away from overt political messaging and embraced a Pan-American modernism that honored indigenous roots while embracing the future. Yet his work still belongs to the spirit of revolutionary muralism, redefining public art as something for all people, especially in post-colonial nations seeking cultural sovereignty. His murals offered a bold vision of identity, progress, and unity in a time of rebuilding, both literally and symbolically, across Latin America. The Taller de Grafica Popular, or People's Graphic Workshop, was a revolutionary printmaking collective founded in Mexico City in 1937. Their print, The Workers' Struggle from the 1940s, exemplifies their mission to use accessible, affordable art in service of political change. Created by anonymous or collaboratively credited artists, this piece uses bold black and white imagery to show workers banding together against oppression. The visuals are direct and powerful, workers with fists raised, tools in hand, often facing off against symbols of capitalism, fascism, or foreign exploitation. Deeply influenced by the Mexican muralists, especially Rivera and Siqueiros, the taller artists brought that same spirit of activism to portable media. Their prints were meant to be wheat pasted on walls, passed out at protests, and included in pamphlets, art as a political weapon. The collective supported labor rights, land reform, education, and anti-fascist causes. The workers' struggle is more than an image, it's a call to action. And like Dada and revolutionary propaganda, it's proof that art doesn't need to be in a museum to matter. In Forbidden Fruit, Patsy Valdez delivers a lush, symbolic tableau of temptation, agency, and identity. Known for her surreal, emotionally charged imagery, Valdez draws on Catholic iconography, fairy tale motifs, and personal memory to depict a Chicana woman caught in a moment of power and danger, the fruit echoing Eve's apple, becomes a metaphor for autonomy and cultural defiance. Valdez's saturated palette and off-kilter perspective destabilize the viewer, pulling us into a dream world where femininity is both weapon and sanctuary. As with much of her work, this piece critiques the expectations placed on Mexican American women, especially regarding sexuality and obedience. The floating figures and theatrical setting reflect her ASCO roots, blurring fine art with performance, fantasy with critique. Forbidden Fruit doesn't just retell a biblical story, it rewrites it. Here, the woman is not punished for her hunger. She claims it, owns it, and becomes the author of her own myth. It's a quietly radical act, painted in velvet rebellion. Delilah Montoya's La Guadalupana reimagines the Virgin of Guadalupe not as a distant icon, but as a living presence among Chicana women. Shot in a photographic style that blends sacred symbolism with contemporary aesthetics, Montoya places her subject in a richly adorned modern space, still cloaked in the familiar blue mantle, but now grounded in lived reality. This isn't just homage, it's reclamation. Montoya uses La Virgen as a bridge between cultural heritage and contemporary identity, showing how spirituality and resistance can coexist. In Chicano communities, La Virgen often stands for protection, resilience, and justice, especially for women navigating systems of marginalization. By reclaiming and recontextualizing her, Montoya critiques both religious dogma and dominant narratives, asking who gets to claim the sacred. La Guadalupana is an act of visual activism rooted in faith, feminism, and cultural pride. It demands that we see the divine not only in churches, but in our neighbors, our sisters, ourselves. In Our Lady of the Checkpoint, Celeste de Luna reimagines the Virgin of Guadalupe as a protector, not just of the faithful, but of migrants navigating militarized border zones. Combining traditional religious imagery with stark border symbolism, De Luna transforms the sacred into a site of resistance. The figure of the Virgin wears a tactical vest and stands vigil at a checkpoint, her halo now radiating with barbed wire. The piece critiques both government surveillance and the weaponization of religion in immigration policy. At the same time, it honors the endurance and sanctity of those forced to make perilous crossings. De Luna's bold lines and raw woodcut texture give the image urgency and grit, emphasizing its connection to grassroots activism and zine culture. Like the Dadaists before her, she uses visual disruption to confront political absurdity. Our Lady of the Checkpoint is both icon and protest sign, demanding justice at the place where faith, fear, and policy collide. Ana Teresa Fernandez's Erasing the Border is a striking visual intervention staged at the U.S.-Mexico border fence. Wearing a little black dress and high heels, Fernandez uses blue paint that precisely matches the sky to cover segments of the metal bars. The illusion makes it appear as though the fence has vanished, erased by an act of performance and color. This temporary gesture doesn't physically alter the border, but it powerfully questions its permanence and legitimacy. Fernandez challenges how we perceive barriers. Are they natural divisions or human impositions? The choice to paint in heels also speaks to gender expectations, subverting traditional roles while asserting strength and control in a contested space. Her work merges performance, painting, and activism, using illusion as a weapon against political reality. In doing so, Fernandez reminds us that borders are not only geographic, they are psychological, cultural, and deeply embedded in our visual landscape. Through art, even the most rigid structures can seem permeable. Judita Hernandez, a former member of the influential collective Los Four, continues the tradition of socially conscious muralism into the 21st century. Her work, Juarez Quinceañera, responds to the tragic femicides in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, drawing attention to the exploitation and disappearance of young women in border towns. With refined pastel technique and symbolic imagery, Hernandez honors the lives lost while connecting past mural traditions to contemporary activist art. Her work bridges eras, echoing Rivera's call for justice while adopting a personal, intimate style that brings modern urgency to the ongoing struggle for human rights and visibility in Latinx communities. This slide serves as a reminder that the legacy of Mexican muralism endures and adapts, continuing to inspire artists to speak truth through their work.
As we close this lecture, reflect on the power of walls to both divide and unify. Mexican muralism began with revolution and lives on in every brushstroke that dares to speak for the people. What would you paint, and where would you place it?